Think of the most boring, unwatchable football game you've ever seen. I guarantee it wasn't as bad as the game played between Yale and Princeton in 1881. This wasn't a game of sloppy turnovers or bad offense. It wasn't even a Big Ten West game. This was a game where for 90 minutes, neither team tried to score. They didn't even try to advance the ball. How is that possible? And how did this single infuriating game become one of the most important moments in sports history, directly inventing the rules that define American football today? To understand that, we have to go back into a time when football was barely football at all. In this video, we're taking a hardcore look into a specific crucial moment in the birth of American football, a game so dull, so infuriating, that it fundamentally changed the sport forever. We're talking about the infamous 1881 block game between two bitter rivals, Yale and Princeton. To understand why this game was such a big deal, we need to rewind a bit and look at where football was in America during the late 19th century. What we now call American football didn't just appear out of nowhere. It evolved, sometimes messily, from other sports, particularly rugby. The very earliest intercollegiate games, like the ones between Rutgers and Princeton in 1869, were actually more similar to soccer than modern football, but things shifted in the 1870s. By the fall of 1876, major schools like Yale and Princeton were fully embracing rugby rules, determined to play the game the way it was played in England. In fact, Princeton played a significant role in convincing other New England schools to switch to rugby. Representatives from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Columbia met at the Massasoit House in Springfield, Massachusetts in November 1876 to standardize rules based largely on the Rugby Football Union's code. While this meeting established the Second Intercollegiate Football Association, standardizing the game was a continuous process. Rules were still fluid. The number of players per side changed over the years, from 25 per side from 1869 to 1873 to 20, 1873 to 1875, then settling on 15 per side from 1876 to 1879. This early game, while moving towards rugby, still had significant drawbacks. A major issue was the scrum. In rugby, when a player was tackled, the forwards from both sides would converge in a chaotic mess, scrambling for the ball. Now, that's horribly simplified, and maybe rugby fans wouldn't call it a chaotic mess, but as an American football guy, that's what it looks like to me. The chaotic mess of the scrum meant a player rarely knew whether they'd be attacking or defending from one moment to the next. It left little room for strategic planning or tactics. This is where Walter Camp, the father of American football, comes in. Camp, a player and later coach at Yale, was a key figure in the legislative meetings of the college teams from 1878 onwards. Camp, or really Yale, had already politically outmaneuvered opponents and had the rules changed so that the number of players on each side changed from 15 to 11. Crucially, at that same 1880 meeting, Camp introduced his most revolutionary change, the scrimmage. The new rule stated, a scrimmage takes place when the holder of the ball puts it on the ground before him and puts it in play while onside, either by kicking the ball or by snapping it back with his foot. This rule also created a brand new position called the quarterback, the player who first received the ball from the snapback and was initially forbidden from rushing forward with the ball. The scrimmage replaced the chaotic scramble of the rugby scrum with an orderly method of putting the ball into play. Most importantly, it established the principle that one side would have clear possession of the ball. Despite these major changes in 1880, the game was still in a state of limbo. It wasn't rugby anymore, but it wasn't quite American football either. A critical element was missing. There was no rule requiring a team to advance the ball within a certain number of plays. There was no system of downs. Camp just assumed teams would still punt the ball frequently, just like in rugby, especially if they had poor field position. But the brain trust at Princeton quickly saw a loophole in the new rules. They realized that with undisputed possession, if they wanted to, they could simply hold on to the ball indefinitely. Why risk losing the ball or making a mistake if you were already ahead or if your opponent was a stronger team? This ability to maintain possession without gaining yardage could be used strategically to run out the clock. This strategic exploitation of the rules came to a head in the 1881 game between Princeton and Yale. Both teams were undefeated. Yale was likely the better team. Princeton, wanting to remain undefeated, decided to use their newfound ability to hold on to the ball. In the first half of the 1881 game, Princeton spent the entire 45 minutes holding on to the football, making no effort to gain yardage. This defensive strategy prevented Yale from having the ball and a chance to score. As you can imagine, the Yale team and the spectators in the stands who had paid money to see a game grew increasingly angry as they watched Princeton sit on the ball. And then, in the second half, Yale decided to adopt the same tactic. Not wanting to risk a turnover or a mistake, they also sat on the ball. And now it was Princeton's turn to get angry. The spectators' frustration reached a boiling point. An article from the Professional Football Researchers Association notes that the onlookers were considering jockicide, a rather vivid term for wanting to kill the players out of sheer boredom and annoyance. And this is why I love doing this channel. It's stories like this disastrous, infuriating, and absolutely critical game that built the sport we love. Now, I'm one person and I dig through old archives and history books to find these stories because I believe they deserve to be told. If you agree and you get value from this kind of hardcore history, I'd like to ask for your support by becoming a channel member. So if you're able to, just click the join button below. So the reaction to this farce of a game was so negative that something drastic had to happen. Forever known as the block game, it was an absolute disaster from a spectator's point of view. It ended, unsurprisingly, in a 0-0 tie. It was widely condemned. A history of Princeton athletics from 1901 stated that nearly everyone was surprised that the new rules designed to prevent ties had instead made the game a farce, a continuous tussle, and an utterly uninteresting display of slow, commonplace play. Try saying that 3 times fast. Another source described it as perhaps the most tedious in the history of college football. This reaction was so negative that something drastic had to happen. Some were so disgusted by the block game that they called for scrapping the entire scrimmage idea and going back to rugby. British expatriates in New York who witnessed the game were particularly critical. They organized a British football club to play rugby and suggested it would be better to crush football in its infancy if the 1881 game was representative of American play. They asked Americans to adopt rugby rules, but the Americans, citing practical experience, disagreed. It was Walter Camp, the father of American football, who once again provided the solution. At the next intercollegiate football convention held on October 12, 1882, just shy of a year after the block game, a proposition to adopt English rugby rules was unanimously rejected. Instead, the representatives focused on amending the current rules, specifically to eliminate more block games. Camp proposed another revolutionary rule, which was accepted. If on 3 consecutive fairs and downs a team shall have not advanced the ball 5 yards, nor lost 10, they must give up the ball to opponents at the spot of the 4th down. This was the birth of the yards to go rule, the direct precursor to the modern downs system. It required a team to make significant progress, originally 5 yards, within a set number of attempts, originally 3 downs, to maintain possession. If they failed, they had to turn the ball over to the other team. This rule made simply sitting on the ball impossible for an entire half of a game. With this new rule requiring teams to gain 5 yards, measurement became essential. And because so much measuring was needed, they decided to line the field off in segments, initially 5-yard segments. The day this rule was accepted, October 12, 1882, is the point from which we can truly say that the game became American football. It declared its independence from its British rugby origins. So the next time you watch a football game and see a team huddle up facing a crucial third down, remember the wild and tedious 1881 block game between Yale and Princeton. That single boring contest highlighted the critical need for a rule beyond simple possession, and it directly led to the invention of the down system and the gridiron field that define American football today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to watch our series on the foundation of American football. Go to our website and click on the timeline feature and select How Football Began. You'll learn how American football evolved from its earliest deadly form to the more modern form we love today.